Ben Carter sat in the small cafe on Kepler Station, staring at the message on his datapad with disbelief flooding through his chest like ice water, reading the words again and again as if repetition might change their meaning. But they remained the same no matter how many times his eyes traced over them. Taejung was dead. The Valari trader, who had become his closest friend over the past 5 years, was gone, killed in what the official report called a shuttle malfunction near the station's outer docking ring. And Ben felt the world tilt sideways around him because this couldn't be real. Couldn't be happening, not to someone as careful and skilled as Taejun. 5 years ago, Ben had been nobody, just another cargo hauler, scraping by on the dangerous outer rim routes where pirates lurked and legitimate traders feared to venture, running cheap goods between forgotten colonies and hoping each run would be his last without incident. Until the day he stumbled across a damaged Valari ship under attack by 3 pirate vessels near the Taurus Belt. Any sane person would have jumped away and left the fight to its inevitable conclusion. But Ben had never been particularly sane when it came to leaving people behind. So he had powered up his ancient freighter's equally ancient weapons and charged in, more out of stubborn human refusal to watch someone die than any real hope of changing the outcome. The pirates had laughed at his approach right up until Ben used every dirty trick he knew from years of desperate survival, ramming one ship and using the explosion as cover to hit another with a lucky shot that took out their engine core. And the third pirate vessel decided this crazy human wasn't worth the trouble and jumped away to find easier prey. Taejun had been so grateful for the rescue that he insisted on buying Ben dinner, which turned into drinks, which turned into a long night of trading stories and realizing they understood each other in a way that crossed the boundaries between their species. Both of them outsiders in their own ways, both making their living on the edges of civilized space where the rules were more flexible. That first meeting had evolved into a partnership where Taejun taught Ben about the intricacies of galactic commerce, while Ben showed the Valari trader the value of human persistence and creativity. And over time, the business relationship had deepened into genuine friendship, the kind where words weren't always necessary and trust was absolute. Now Taejun was gone, and Ben felt hollow inside, empty in a way he hadn't felt since losing his family back on Earth years before joining the great human expansion into the galaxy. The message went on to inform him that his attendance was required at the reading of Taejun's will on Harmony Point Station in 3 days, which struck Ben as strange because he hadn't known Taejun had made a will, hadn't even considered that his friend possessed enough wealth to make such legal arrangements necessary. 3 days later, Ben found himself in a sleek conference room on Harmony Point, surrounded by polished chrome and viewing screens showing the peaceful nebula outside. Sitting across from a severe-looking Valari lawyer whose scales shimmered with the deep blue color that indicated advanced age and high status among her people. "Mr. Carter," the lawyer said, her voice carrying the musical quality that all Valari possessed. "I am attorney Hae-won, executor of Taejun's estate, and I must inform you that you are the primary beneficiary of his will." Ben shook his head in confusion, wondering what Taejun could possibly have left him beyond perhaps one of the smaller trading vessels. Maybe enough credits to cover funeral arrangements. "I don't understand," Ben said, his human directness making the lawyer's eyebrow ridges rise slightly. "Taejun named you inheritor of his complete estate," Hae-won explained, activating a holographic display that showed assets and numbers so large Ben couldn't immediately process them. "This includes his trading company, which operates across 17 systems, his personal fleet of 32 vessels, his primary residence on the orbital platform above Valor Prime, various properties on 8 different worlds, investment portfolios, and liquid assets totaling approximately 8 billion credits." The room spun around Ben, and he gripped the armrests of his chair, certain he had misheard, because 8 billion credits was the kind of money that bought planets, not the amount that cargo haulers dealt with. There must be some mistake, Ben managed to say, his voice sounding distant even to his own ears. There is no mistake, HFY assured him, then paused in a way that made Ben's stomach clench with anticipation of worse news to come. There is, however, one additional inheritance that requires explanation under Valari law. The lawyer touched a control, and a door at the far end of the conference room slid open with a whisper of expensive engineering. The woman who entered was the most beautiful creature Ben had ever seen, her skin shimmering with the iridescent quality unique to Valari females, shifting through shades of pearl and silver as she moved, her eyes a deep violet that seemed to hold entire galaxies, her features delicate and perfect in a way that human genetics could never quite achieve. She wore traditional Valari robes that flowed like water around her slender form, and she moved with grace that made Ben think of dancers in poetry. Coming to stand beside HFY with her head bowed in a gesture of submission that made Ben immediately uncomfortable. This is Seo-Yun, HFY said formally, Tae-chun's bonded wife, who according to Valari tradition now passes into your care as part of the inheritance. Ben shot to his feet, his chair clattering backward from the force of his movement, human outrage burning through his shock like fire. Absolutely not, he said, his voice louder than he intended. I can't accept the person as property. That's slavery. That's wrong. HFY raised her hand in a calming gesture, her expression understanding rather than offended. It is not ownership in the way you think, Mr. Carter, she explained patiently. Under Valari law, a widow without living family returns to the care of her late husband's closest companion, a tradition meant to honor the deceased judgment and ensure the spouse is protected and provided for. Should you refuse, Seo-Yun would be declared familyless and lose all social standing within Valari society. Becoming essentially an outcast, Ben looked at Seo-Yun, who had not raised her eyes or spoken a single word, standing there like a statue carved from living opal. And he felt trapped between his human moral sensibilities and the harsh reality that his refusal would destroy this woman's life. This is insane, he muttered, running his hand through his hair in frustrated confusion. Perhaps, HFY agreed, but it is our law. And Tae-jun trusted you to honor it, to care for Seo-Yun as he would have wished. Ben noticed movement beyond the conference room's windows, other beings moving through the station's corridors, and several of them were watching the proceedings with unusual interest, their expressions calculating in a way that made his instincts from years of dangerous trading run cold. HFY noticed his attention and leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping to a more confidential tone. I must warn you, Mr. Carter, that many dangerous individuals wanted Tae-chun's wealth and saw him as an obstacle to their ambitions. They will see you as an easy target, just a simple human who got lucky. They will come for you. Ben looked from the lawyer to Seo-Yun and back again, feeling the weight of responsibility settling onto his shoulders like planetary gravity. If I accept, he said slowly, she can leave whenever she wants. I won't keep anyone against their will. That is between you and Seo-Yun, HFY said, then gestured to the documents floating in holographic light. Do you accept the inheritance in full? Ben thought of Tae-jun, of the friend who had trusted him enough to leave him everything, including the care of someone he must have loved deeply. And despite all his doubts and confusion, Ben knew he couldn't dishonor that trust. I accept, he said, and saw Seo-Yun's shoulders relax slightly, though she still did not look up or speak. The galaxy had just changed for Ben Carter in ways he couldn't yet comprehend. And somewhere in the shadows, predators were already circling, waiting for their chance to strike. The orbital estate that had belonged to Tae-jun hung in space, like a jewel against the swirling colors of the gas giant it circled, vast and elegant in ways that made Ben's old cargo hauler look like a child's toy by comparison. And as their shuttle approached the docking bay, he felt increasingly out of place in this world of wealth and refinement. Seoyeon sat across from him in the shuttle's passenger compartment, silent as she had been since leaving Harmony Point, her violet eyes fixed on something Ben couldn't see, distant and unreachable as the stars themselves. He had tried talking to her during the journey, attempted to assure her that she was free to go wherever she wished, that he wouldn't enforce any archaic traditions, but she had simply nodded once and returned to her silence, leaving Ben frustrated and uncertain. The shuttle docked with a gentle thump and Seoyeon rose smoothly, gesturing for Ben to follow as she led him through corridors that seemed designed to showcase wealth at every turn. Walls adorned with art from 100 different worlds. Floors made of materials Ben couldn't identify that seemed to glow with inner light. The estate was enormous, with rooms that served purposes Ben couldn't guess and technology that responded to Seoyeon's presence as if the whole place knew her. Doors opening before she reached them, lights adjusting to perfect levels, climate controls maintaining ideal comfort. She showed him to what she called his quarters, which turned out to be a suite larger than any apartment Ben had ever lived in, complete with panoramic windows showing the gorgeous view of the gas, giant storms and a bathroom that looked like something from a luxury resort. This was Tochun's private space, Seoyeon said, her voice soft and musical like all Valari. The first words she had spoken directly to him. "It is yours now." Before Ben could respond, she had bowed and left, disappearing down the corridor like a ghost, leaving him alone in a dead man's home, feeling more lost than he had ever felt in the emptiness of space. Days passed in a strange rhythm where Ben tried to understand the vast business empire he had inherited while Seoyeon managed the estate with flawless efficiency, appearing when needed and vanishing when not, always silent, always distant, like a beautiful shadow moving through the halls. The estate's computer system revealed the true scope of Ta-Chun's operations, and Ben spent hours studying financial records and trade agreements, trying to make sense of deals that spanned star systems and involved species he had barely heard of. What worried him most were the messages piling up from business partners and competitors, each one carefully worded, but carrying an undercurrent of testing, of seeing whether this human inheritor understood the complex web of relationships and obligations that Taejin had navigated so skillfully. Ben's head ached from trying to absorb it all, and he was beginning to realize just how much danger Haewon had warned him about, because every message was a probe, every inquiry a test, and failure would mean losing everything Taejin had built. On the 5th day at the estate, a delegation arrived requesting a formal dinner meeting. Representatives from the Kresh Trading Consortium, who had been one of Ta-Chun's major partners. And Ben agreed because he couldn't hide forever. The dining hall was spectacular. A room designed to impress with a table that could seat 30 people and windows showing the stars beyond. And the Kresh arrived with 3 representatives whose reptilian features and cold eyes reminded Ben of predators sizing up prey. Ben wore the best clothes he owned, which felt inadequate compared to the Kresh's elaborate ceremonial garments. And he tried to project confidence he didn't feel as servants brought course after course of exotic foods. Seoyeon served at the meal, moving silently around the table, refilling drinks and ensuring everything was perfect. And Ben felt uncomfortable watching her perform these tasks, wanting to tell her she didn't need to serve anyone, but sensing that now was not the time. The lead Kresh, whose name was Skrath, smiled with too many teeth as he brought up business matters, his translator rendering his hissing speech into smooth galactic common. "We understand you are new to this position, Mr. Carter," Skrath said, his tone friendly but his eyes calculating. "Perhaps we should renegotiate our standing agreements to something simpler, more appropriate for someone of your limited experience." He activated a holographic display showing a new contract that Ben's quick scan revealed was terrible, giving the crash favorable terms while reducing Ben's profit margins to almost nothing. Essentially theft dressed up in legal language. Ben felt his temper rising. That stubborn human refusal to be pushed around that had gotten him in trouble more times than he could count. "I may be new to this," Ben said carefully, "but I'm not stupid. This contract is garbage, and you know it." Scrath's smile widened and the other crash leaned forward, sensing weakness in Ben's crude directness, ready to move in for the kill. "Perhaps you don't understand the complexity of galactic commerce," Scrath said condescendingly. "The original agreements were made under different circumstances, with Tae-chan's expertise guiding decisions. You cannot possibly maintain those same terms without his knowledge." Ben opened his mouth to argue, anger making him reckless, when Seo-yin spoke from behind him. Section 7. Paragraph 12 of the original contract specifies automatic renewal unless both parties agree to renegotiation. Her voice was cold and clear, nothing like the quiet subservience she had shown before. Article 4, subsection 9, requires any proposed changes to maintain profit parity across all involved parties. Your new proposal violates both clauses and constitutes breach of contract under Galactic Trade Council regulations. The room went silent, and everyone turned to stare at Seo-yin, who stood holding a serving pitcher with her eyes locked on Scrath like targeting lasers. She continued speaking, reciting clause after clause from memory, exposing how the Kresh proposal violated the original agreement, then pivoting to demonstrate weaknesses in their position, citing market conditions and trade flow data that proved they needed this partnership more than Ben did. Within minutes, she had not only defended the original contract, but negotiated better terms, adding clauses that increased Ben's profit share while actually giving the Kresh better long-term stability, playing their own greed against them until Scrath had no choice but to accept or walk away from a highly profitable arrangement. The Kresh left shortly after, their earlier smugness replaced by barely concealed humiliation, and Ben sat at the table staring at Seo-yin in amazement. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice filled with genuine wonder. Seo-yin set down the pitcher, and for the first time since they met, she looked directly at him, really looked at him, and her violet eyes held intelligence and strength that took his breath away. "I was not merely Tae-chan's wife," she said quietly. "I was his business strategist, his advisor, the architect of most of his successful deals. But Valari culture requires women to remain silent in public, to let their husbands take credit for their work, to hide their intelligence behind tradition and subservience." She moved to the window, looking out at the stars with an expression Ben couldn't read. "Taejum valued my mind as much as my companionship," she continued. "He listened to my counsel in private and built his empire on strategies we developed together. He was one of the few males of my species who saw women as equals, who understood that our silence was imposed rather than natural." Ben stood and walked to stand beside her, seeing her in an entirely new light. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" he asked. "Because I needed to observe you first," Seo-yin said, turning to face him to determine what kind of man you were, whether you would try to control me or free me, whether you possessed the strength to survive what's coming. "What's coming?" Ben asked, though part of him already knew. "Taten's death was not an accident," Seo-yin said, her voice hard with suppressed emotion. "Someone powerful wanted his empire, and they killed him to take it. Now they will come for you, and they will not stop until you are dead or destroyed." She stepped closer, her eyes intense and focused. "I can protect you," she said. "I can teach you everything you need to know. I can help you preserve Tae-chan's legacy and turn it into something even greater, but only if you trust me completely. Only if you let me be your true partner rather than treating me as some fragile thing to be protected. Ben thought about everything he had just witnessed. The brilliant strategic mind hidden behind tradition, the fierce loyalty to Tichun's memory, the offer of partnership from someone who clearly didn't need him but chose to honor her late husband's judgment. He thought about Taejun, who had trusted him enough to leave him everything, who must have known that Ben would see So-Yun's worth if given the chance. "I'm just a cargo hauler," Ben said honestly. "I don't know anything about running a trading empire, but I know how to trust my instincts. And my instincts say that you're the smartest person in this entire sector." He held out his hand in the human gesture of agreement. "Partners?" he asked. So-Yun looked at his extended hand, then reached out and gripped it firmly. Her skin cool and smooth against his. "Partners," she agreed. And for the first time since they met, she almost smiled. Ben had the feeling his life was about to become far more complicated. But somehow that didn't seem like such a terrible thing anymore. The next weeks transformed Ben's understanding of everything he thought he knew about galactic commerce. With So-Yun as his teacher and guide, through the complex web of relationships and power dynamics that govern trade between the stars. She taught him about the unspoken hierarchies between species, how the elder races like the Vylari and Centauri considered themselves natural leaders, while younger species like humans were often dismissed as crude upstarts, how reputation and face mattered more than legal contracts in many cultures, how a single mistake could destroy decades of carefully built trust. Ben brought his own perspective to their partnership, that human ability to see solutions where others saw only problems, to question traditions that didn't make sense, to connect with people on a level that transcended species boundaries. "You need to understand the Quillen mining contract," So-Yun said one morning, projecting a holographic display of operations on 3 different worlds. "These facilities produce rare minerals essential to our trade network. But there's been increasing unrest among the workers." Ben studied the data, seeing production numbers dropping steadily over the past months, then pulled up the worker complaint logs that the Vylari overseers had filed. What he read made his stomach turn with disgust. The workers, mostly Quillen and Draxi species, who were considered lower class in galactic society, were being treated like machines rather than living beings, forced to work 20-hour shifts with minimal rest, housed in cramped facilities with poor life support, paid wages that barely covered their basic needs. "This is wrong," Ben said, his human sense of fairness offended on a fundamental level. So-Yun looked at him with an expression he was learning to read as curiosity mixed with caution. "It is standard practice across the industry," she said carefully. Taejun inherited these operations from a previous owner and maintained them as they were. Changing the system would increase costs significantly. "I don't care," Ben said flatly. "Already making plans. I'm going to visit these sites personally." So-Yun's eyes widened slightly. The Vylari equivalent of shock. "That would be highly unusual," she said. "Owners do not visit worker facilities. It would suggest you don't trust your overseers to manage properly." "Good," Ben replied. "Because I don't trust anyone who treats people like this." 3 days later, Ben stood in the processing facility on Draxton 3, breathing recycled air that tasted of metal and chemicals, watching Quillen workers move through their tasks with the mechanical efficiency of those who had given up hope of anything better. The Quillen were insectoid beings, their chitinous bodies designed for heavy labor, their compound eyes reflecting the harsh lights of the facility. And when Ben tried to speak with them directly, their surprise was almost painful to see. The Vylari overseer, a pompous official named Cardon, tried to hurry Ben through the inspection, clearly uncomfortable with this unprecedented attention from ownership. "Everything operates within legal parameters," Cardon insisted, his musical voice carrying an edge of defensive. Production meets quotas. Safety standards are maintained. There is no cause for concern. Ben ignored him and approached a Quillen worker who was taking a brief rest between shifts. The being's exoskeleton showing signs of stress fractures that spoke of years of hard labor. "How long have you worked here?" Ben asked through his translator. The Quillen's antennae twitched in confusion, clearly unused to direct questions from management. 12 cycles. Honored owner, the worker said in the clicking language of his people. I transfer wages to family on homeworld. Support 3 children and elderly parent. When was your last full rest period? Ben pressed. The Quillen hesitated, then admitted he couldn't remember the last time he had more than 4 hours of consecutive sleep. Ben felt anger building in his chest. That human fury at injustice that had gotten him in trouble his whole life, but that he had never learned to suppress. He turned to Cardun with an expression that made the Valari take a step backward. You're fired, Ben said simply, effective immediately. Pack your things and leave this facility. Cardun's scales flushed with shock and indignation. You cannot simply dismiss me. He protested. I have done nothing wrong. I have managed according to established protocols. Those protocols end now, Ben said, his voice hard. And anyone who thinks treating workers like this is acceptable has no place in my operations. He activated his comm and connected to Co Yun back at the estate. I need you to implement changes across all our mining operations, Ben said. Knowing she was listening carefully, 8-hour work shifts maximum. Proper rest facilities with good life support, wages increased by 40%. And proper medical care for all workers. Seo Hyun's voice came through the comm with a note of concern. Ben, those changes will reduce profit margins significantly. Other trading houses will see it as weakness. They will assume you don't understand basic economics. Let them think what they want, Ben replied. I'm not running a prison. I'm running a business. And any operation that requires treating people like garbage to be profitable isn't worth having. He spent the next 3 days visiting all the mining facilities, firing overseers who protested the changes and promoting workers who showed leadership qualities, implementing human-style labor reforms that shocked the entire industry. News of what he was doing spread through the galactic trade networks like wildfire, and the response was exactly what Seo Yun had predicted. The other trading houses laughed at the foolish human who was destroying his profit margins out of misplaced sentiment, betting on how long before his operations collapsed under the weight of increased costs. But something unexpected happened instead. Worker productivity didn't just maintain. It soared beyond anything the facilities had achieved before, because beings who were treated with dignity and respect worked harder and better than those driven by fear and exhaustion. The Quillen and Draxi workers became fiercely loyal to Ben, grateful for the first employer in their experience who saw them as people rather than resources. And that loyalty translated into efficiency that no amount of harsh oversight could match. Word spread through working-class communities across multiple systems, whispered in docking bars and worker dormitories. Tales of the human who actually cared about those he employed. And skilled workers began seeking out positions with Ben's operations. The best talent tired of being treated as disposable. Seo Yun watched this transformation with growing amazement. Seeing principles she had thought naive prove themselves in hard numbers and practical results. I never expected this, she admitted one evening as they reviewed production reports showing increased output across all facilities. Taejun was a good employer by galactic standards, but he never questioned the fundamental system. You're changing something I thought was unchangeable. Ben shrugged with characteristic human modesty. I just treated people the way I'd want to be treated, he said. It's not complicated. Perhaps that's what makes it revolutionary, Seo Yun said quietly. Something like respect in her voice. Their relationship had evolved over the weeks into genuine partnership. with Seo-yun teaching Ben the intricacies of negotiation and strategy while Ben brought his human perspective to problems others thought unsolvable. Ben found himself appreciating not just her brilliant mind, but her dry sense of humor that emerged once she felt comfortable. Her dedication to honoring Tae-chun's memory by building something worthy of him. Her fierce determination hidden behind graceful courtesy. One night they sat together in the estate's observation lounge, watching the gas giant storms rage in beautiful chaos beyond the windows. And Seo-yun spoke more openly than she ever had before. Tae-jun used to say that humans were the galaxy's wild card, she told Ben, her voice soft with memory. That other species had grown comfortable in their hierarchies and traditions, but humans questioned everything, refused to accept that anything was impossible. She turned to look at Ben directly. He said that's why he trusted you with everything, she continued. Because he knew you would do what was right even when it was difficult. That you would protect what he built while transforming it into something better. Ben felt the weight of that trust. The responsibility of honoring a dead friend's faith in him. I'm trying, he said honestly, but I keep feeling like I'm in over my head. Like one wrong move will bring everything crashing down. That's when I know you're ready for what comes next, Seo-yun said, her expression turning serious. Because the people who killed Tae-jun are watching you now, and they won't wait much longer to make their move, as if her words had summoned them. Ben's comm device chirped with an incoming priority message. The sender was identified as Vex Thor, representative of the Centauri Syndicate, one of the most powerful criminal organizations in the known galaxy. Ben opened the message and read the simple, threatening words. We are prepared to purchase your inherited assets for 3 billion credits. This is a generous offer that expires in 48 hours. Refuse, and you will discover we can be considerably less generous. Seo-yun read the message over his shoulder, and her body went rigid. Vex Thor? She whispered, and Ben heard something like hatred in her voice. He's the one who killed Tae-jun. I'm certain of it. Ben looked at her and saw pain and rage fighting for control behind her careful composure. Can you prove it? He asked. Seo-yun led Ben to a hidden room deep in the estate's secure levels. A place she revealed had been Tae-chun's private sanctuary, where he kept information too sensitive for normal storage. The room was small and plain compared to the estate's usual luxury, containing only a secure computer terminal and walls lined with data, storage devices that hummed quietly with encrypted information. Tae-jun suspected the syndicate was moving against him for months before his death, Seo-yun explained, her fingers dancing across the terminal's interface. He began gathering evidence of their illegal operations, their connections to corrupt officials, their methods of eliminating competition. The screen filled with communications intercepts, financial records showing money laundering schemes, testimonies from beings who had witnessed syndicate violence. And at the center of it all, encrypted messages that Seo-yun had spent months decoding. This message was sent 3 days before Tae-jun died, she said, highlighting a communication string. It's from Vex Thor to a technician who specialized in sabotaging ship systems, ordering him to arrange an accident that would look like equipment failure. Ben read the decoded text and felt cold certainty settle in his bones. This proves Vex Thor ordered the murder, he said. Yes, Seo-yun confirmed. But taking it to the Galactic Trade Council is complicated. The Centauri Syndicate has influence that reaches into the highest levels of government. They have blackmail material on council members, judges, law enforcement officials across dozens of systems. She turned to face him, frustration evident in her posture. And my testimony as a Valari widow carries little legal weight without family backing, she continued bitterly. Our culture's restrictions on women mean the courts would question whether I understood what I was seeing, whether Tae-jun really trusted me with this information, or if I'm simply a grieving spouse seeing conspiracies where none exist. Ben understood the problem immediately, and it made him angry. The same human fury at injustice that had driven him to reform the mining operations. So what do we do? He asked. Seo-Yun looked at him with an expression that suggested she had been waiting for him to ask. We use a human solution, she said. Something the Syndicate won't expect because it's not how galactic power games are traditionally played. Ben raised an eyebrow. Curious. We go public, Seo-Yun explained. Humans have this concept of investigative journalism, of using media pressure to force action when official channels are corrupted. It's considered crude and unsophisticated by most elder species, but it's also highly effective. Ben felt a smile spreading across his face as he grasped the brilliance of the strategy. The galactic elite might ignore official complaints, he said, picking up her thread, but they can't ignore public outrage, especially if we can get the working-class species on our side. Exactly, Seo-Yun agreed. And you've already built goodwill with those communities through your labor reforms. Workers across multiple systems know your name and trust that you're different from typical owners. They spent the next day contacting independent news networks, particularly the human-run media outlets that had been growing in influence across the galaxy, offering exclusive access to the story of corporate murder and syndicate corruption. The reporters were eager, sensing a story that could make their careers, and they descended on the estate with cameras and questions, interviewing Ben and carefully reviewing the evidence Seo-Yun provided. The human journalists brought their species' particular talent for emotional storytelling, crafting a narrative that went beyond dry legal evidence to show Taejun as a person, a friend, someone who had been murdered for profit by an organization that had killed countless others. They interviewed workers Ben had helped, who spoke passionately about the changes he had made and their faith that he would seek justice for the friend who had trusted them both. The story broke across communication networks like a supernova, spreading through social media platforms and news feeds with the speed that only scandalous truth could achieve. The emotional, direct human style of reporting resonated with working-class species who had long felt ignored by the sanitized, official media controlled by the elder races. Within hours, the story was everywhere, trending on every major network, with billions of beings across the galaxy discussing the evidence, debating the implications, demanding action from authorities who had looked the other way for too long. Vexthor's response was predictable and swift. The first Ben knew of the attack was when the estate's defensive systems activated in the middle of the night. Alarms screaming through the corridors as automated weapons engaged approaching ships. Ben rolled out of bed and grabbed the weapon Seo-Yun had insisted he keep nearby, running toward the command center where she was already coordinating defenses. 3 assault ships, she reported crisply, her fingers flying across control interfaces. Military-grade weapons and professional boarding teams. Vexthor is making his move. Through the view screens, Ben could see the attacking ships. Sleek predators firing on the estate's shields with concentrated weapon bursts designed to overwhelm defenses through brute force. How long can the shields hold? He asked. Maybe 20 minutes, Seo-Yun said. But they'll board us before then, cutting through the hull where the shields are weakest. Ben's mind raced through options, drawing on years of survival in dangerous situations, and an idea formed that was either brilliant or insane. Can we broadcast from here? He asked. Send a live feed to every news network that carried our story? Seo-Yun looked at him with dawning understanding. You want to show them attacking us? She said. I want to show the entire galaxy what the Syndicate does to people who expose them, Ben replied. Let Vexthor commit his murder in front of billions of witnesses. Seo-Yun's smile was fierce and approving. That's very human of you, she said. Already activating the communication systems, within seconds they were broadcasting live, showing the attacking ships, the weapons fire. Ben speaking directly to camera with Seo-Yun beside him. This is Ben Carter, he said, his voice steady despite the explosions rocking the estate. The Centauri Syndicate is attacking my home right now because we exposed their role in murdering Taejun. They're trying to kill us to silence the truth. And I want everyone watching to see what happens when you stand up to corruption. The broadcast went out to every major network, picked up and rebroadcast by hundreds of media outlets, viewed by beings across the galaxy who watched in real time as the drama unfolded. Evacuate the staff, Ben told Seo-Yun. Get everyone to the emergency escape pods. I have an idea, but it's going to get dangerous. Seo-Yun shook her head. I'm not leaving, she said firmly. We fight together. There wasn't time to argue because the boarding teams were cutting through the hull in 3 locations, and Ben could hear the screech of metal being carved away by industrial torches. Can we seal off sections and create choke points? Ben asked. Already done, Seo-Yun replied. But they'll break through eventually. There are too many of them. The first mercenaries burst through into the lower levels, armored figures carrying weapons meant for shipboard combat, and the estate's automated defenses opened fire. Ben and Seo-Yun moved through the corridors, using their knowledge of the layout to stay ahead of the attackers, setting traps and ambushes that slowed the mercenaries but couldn't stop them. What shocked Ben was watching Seo-Yun fight. She moved like liquid death, using weapons with a skill that spoke of extensive training, her graceful exterior hiding a warrior's capability that emerged in the heat of combat. Veilari women are trained as protectors from childhood, she explained between exchanges of fire. But we're forbidden from showing these skills in polite society, considered unfeminine and inappropriate. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard, Ben said. And Seo-Yun laughed despite the danger. They held the mercenaries off for 15 minutes, using every trick and advantage their knowledge of the estate provided. And all the while the broadcast continued, showing the desperate fight, the overwhelming odds, the determination to survive when galactic patrol ships finally arrived, responding to the massive public outcry generated by the broadcast. They found the estate's defenders still fighting, still broadcasting, still refusing to surrender. The patrol ships ordered the mercenaries to stand down, and when they refused, opened fire with the authority of galactic law, destroying one assault ship and forcing the others to retreat with their boarding teams still inside the estate. The mercenaries surrendered when faced with patrol forces and were taken into custody, along with evidence of their connection to Vex Thor and the Centauri Syndicate. Ben and Seo-Yun stood in the damaged command center, covered in dust and minor injuries, watching as patrol officers secured the scene. The broadcast had reached an estimated 20 billion viewers across the galaxy, and the public response was unprecedented, with massive demonstrations demanding justice, calls for investigations, and pressure on the Galactic Trade Council that they couldn't ignore. Vex Thor had made his move, but in doing so, he had exposed himself and his organization in ways that decades of careful operation had avoided. The Syndicate's reputation was destroyed, shown for what it really was in front of the entire galaxy, and Ben had survived, protected by the human strategy of transparency and public pressure that the elder races had never. The investigation that followed moved with unprecedented speed, driven by public pressure that the Galactic Trade Council couldn't ignore even if they wanted to. Vex Thor was arrested within days, dragged from his luxury compound on Centauri Prime, while news cameras captured every moment for the billions watching across the galaxy. The evidence Seo-Yun had compiled, combined with testimony from captured mercenaries who turned on their employer to save themselves, painted a devastating picture of decades of murder, extortion, and corruption. The trial became the most watched legal proceeding in galactic history, with Ben and Seo-Yun testifying about Taechun's death and the Syndicate's subsequent attacks. Vextor was convicted on 47 counts of murder, conspiracy, and racketeering. Sentenced to life imprisonment in a maximum security facility where his wealth and influence couldn't reach. The Centauri Syndicate itself was dismantled, its assets seized by the Trade Council and distributed among the victims of its various crimes. Ben Carter became famous in ways he had never wanted. His face known across hundreds of worlds as the Human, who had brought down one of the galaxy's most powerful criminal organizations. Through methods the elder races had considered crude, but which had proven devastatingly effective, more importantly to Ben. Justice had been served for his friend, standing in front of Taechun's memorial on Valor Prime, with Seo Yun beside him and thousands of beings gathered to honor the traitor's memory. Ben felt a sense of closure he hadn't expected. He would have enjoyed this, Seo Yun said quietly, looking at the massive crowd of workers and common beings who had come to pay respects. Taejun always said the measure of a person's worth wasn't in their wealth, but in how many lives they touched positively. Ben nodded, thinking of the friend who had trusted him with everything and whose death had set him on this unexpected path. The months following the trial transformed Ben's inherited trading empire in ways that shocked the galactic business community, with Seo Yun as his partner in truth rather than tradition. They implemented human-style business ethics across every operation they controlled. Fair treatment of workers became standard, with benefits and protections that other companies considered excessive. Transparent dealing replaced the complex web of secret arrangements that had characterized galactic commerce. Partnerships were built on mutual benefit and honest negotiation rather than manipulation and leverage. Other trading houses initially mocked these reforms, predicting Ben's operations would fail under the weight of idealistic impracticality. Instead, the empire grew stronger and more profitable than it had ever been under Taechun's management. Workers across the galaxy wanted to work for the Human who treated them with dignity, and top talent from every species sought positions in his operations. Business partners appreciated the straightforward contracts and reliable dealings, finding that honest trade was less stressful and more sustainable than constant political maneuvering. Consumers trusted products and services from a company known for ethical practices, and that trust translated into market share. What Ben had proven was something the galaxy hadn't understood, that treating people well wasn't just morally right but practically effective. Seo Yun became a symbol for Valari women and females of other species with similar cultural restrictions. The media attention from the trial and its aftermath had shown her intelligence and capability to the entire galaxy, making it impossible for traditional voices to dismiss her as an outlier or exception. She received thousands of messages from Valari, women thanking her for demonstrating that their enforced silence was cultural rather than natural, that they could be warriors and strategists and leaders if given the chance. The Valari Council, embarrassed by the galactic scrutiny of their gender traditions, began quietly reforming their marriage laws and educational systems. Change was slow, but it had begun, sparked by one woman who had refused to hide her strength when it mattered most. Ben and Seo-Yun's partnership had evolved far beyond the awkward inheritance arrangement that had brought them together. They worked as equals, combining her strategic brilliance with his innovative human perspective to build something neither could have achieved alone. On a personal level, mutual respect had deepened into genuine friendship and affection. Ben had legally freed Seo-Yun from any obligation months ago, ensuring she had independent wealth and complete freedom to go wherever she wished. She had chosen to stay, not because of tradition or duty, but because she wanted to continue what they had started together. One evening they sat in the rebuilt command center of the estate, now upgraded with better defenses and emergency systems, watching the gas giant's eternal storms through repaired windows. "I've been thinking," Ben said, breaking the comfortable silence, "about what we've built here. And where we go next? Seo Yoon turned to look at him with those violet eyes that no longer seemed distant, but warm with understanding. What are you thinking? She asked. Tae-chan's legacy isn't really the wealth or the business empire, Ben said slowly, working through thoughts that had been forming for weeks. It's the bridges he built between different species, between different ways of seeing the universe. He gestured at the data displays showing their various operations across the galaxy. We've proven that human ideas about fairness and transparency can work in galactic commerce, he continued. That treating people with dignity is profitable as well as right. That cooperation beats exploitation in the long run. You want to expand this model, Seo Yoon said. Understanding immediately, I want to show the galaxy there's another way, Ben confirmed. Not through conquest or force, but through example. Through building something so successful that others have to take notice, Seo Yoon smiled. That genuine expression of joy that had become more common as she grew comfortable showing emotions. Taejun would love that, she said. He always believed that humans would change the galaxy. Not through military might, but through your stubborn insistence on doing things your own way. Is that a yes? Ben asked. It's a yes, Seo Yoon confirmed. Partners in changing the galaxy. It has a nice sound to it. They spent the next hours planning, discussing strategies and possibilities, their conversation flowing with the ease of two minds that understood each other perfectly. As the night cycle deepened and the stars rotated beyond their windows, Ben felt gratitude for the strange path his life had taken. Tae-chun's death had been a tragedy, but from that tragedy had come something unexpected and valuable. A partnership that transcended species and culture. A business model that proved ethics and success weren't opposites. A friendship that had helped heal the grief of loss, and most importantly, proof that humans had something unique to offer the galaxy. Not superior technology or military strength, but a different way of thinking about cooperation and community. The next morning, they prepared to depart for a tour of their operations, visiting the workers and partners who had become the foundation of their success. Standing in the docking bay as their ship was readied, Seo Yoon turned to Ben with an expression of contentment. Do you ever regret accepting the inheritance? She asked. Ben thought about the question. Considering everything that had happened since that day in the conference room on Harmony Point, the danger and violence, the responsibility and pressure, the transformation of his entire life, but also the friendships made, the lives improved, the proof that one person could make a difference. No, he said honestly, Taejun gave me more than wealth. He gave me purpose, and he gave me you as a partner. I wouldn't change any of it. Seo Yoon reached out and squeezed his hand in a gesture of affection that would have been unthinkable for a traditional Velari woman. Then we honor his memory well, she said, by building something he would be proud of. They boarded their ship and departed the orbital estate, joining the flow of galactic traffic that moved between the stars. Two unlikely partners who had found common purpose in honoring a friend's legacy. A human cargo hauler who had become a business leader. A Velari woman who had broken free from tradition to show her true strength. Together, they were changing the galaxy one ethical decision at a time, proving that cooperation and fairness could triumph over exploitation and corruption. The journey ahead would bring new challenges and opportunities, but they would face them together, partners in every sense of the word, building a future that honored the past while creating something entirely new. And somewhere among the stars, Ben liked to think Taejun was watching and smiling, proud of what his trust had made possible. The galaxy was changing, slowly but surely. And it was changing because one human had refused to accept that cruelty was necessary. That inequality was inevitable, that different species couldn't work together as equals. Ben Carter had inherited wealth and responsibility. But what he had truly gained was the chance to prove that humans belonged among the stars, not as conquerors, but as catalysts, not as rulers, but as partners, bringing their stubborn optimism and refusal to accept that a better way wasn't possible. And the galaxy, whether it knew it yet or not, would never be quite the same.